Thank you very much. And a pleasure to be here joining you from Panama, the Republic of Panama, not Panama City, USA. And yes, for this debriefing of our first mathematical modeling workshop for faculty at my university, in Spanish, Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá. And so for future references, I'll probably just say UTP. Let's see, so this is not moving. How do I get it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so the UTP is one of four public universities in the country. It offers engineering degrees in a number of fields, and also BAs in related areas, professions, similar to engineering. In a university like ours, of course, ODs constitute a significant portion of the engineering curriculum, but we do find that students hardly ever see the relevance of this course to their professional life. They generally see it as a collection of formulas to be learned and applied to standard textbook problems. And so the idea that ODEs are for modeling the world, that's where they stem from, is completely lost on them. And of course, much of this is our responsibility as teachers, because we do not establish the bridge, we don't establish the connection to the real world. For many, many years now, important organizations that have to do with the education of engineers have been calling for modeling to be included in undergraduate programs. I guess most of the folks who are at this conference are aware of this, but certainly in my latitudes, this is not so common or a notion. And so personally, whenever I've taught the ODE course to my undergraduate students who are in the second year, usually in their second year, I've tried to include some form of real world connection, of modeling, be it cooling, obtaining, have them do projects where they actually obtain experimental data, whether it be of cooling a cup of coffee or draining a soda bottle. But I had always done it in a, I don't want to say haphazard, but certainly in a, perhaps in a somewhat naive way, having never really done it myself as a student or being trained in doing it. I was lucky to find materials on the internet I could use, but it wasn't until I came across Brian Winkle at the early months of 2019 and learned about SIMIODE that I realized there was a whole other world out there that I could use to improve what I was doing in classroom, and in fact, what perhaps some of my colleagues were doing. I applied for and was able to obtain a grant from CENACYT, which is the National Secretariat for Science of Technology, kind of like the I'm not sure what you call it. In the US, there's a famous one. I can't think of the letters now, but there's a famous association that you get grants from. Well, that's our equivalent. And it was approved. We were able to conduct, it took about a year, but we were able to conduct a workshop in mathematical modeling in the classroom for faculty and conducted by Brian Winkle himself. It was a great honor to have him. And this took place during what is our summer time or summer period, February 3rd through 7th of last year. We had 20 participants, among them UTP professors from the University of Panama, from a private university, from secondary school. We had 3 graduate students, master's program students who participated trying to hone in on their modeling skills, and even some undergraduate students. So I was quite pleased with the heterogeneity of the group that participated. But of course, um, all of this had to happen in Spanish, so we had simultaneous or consecutive rather translation, which I was doing as Brian Winkle was speaking. And as a result of this workshop, 8 of the SIMIODE modeling scenarios are now translated into Spanish, the ones that are indicated here in this slide. And so they are available to a larger group of professors out there in the world, of the Spanish-speaking world, for them to implement with their own students. Of course, really the proof of the success, I guess, of this workshop is really in how it actually translates into something happening differently at the institution. And I am pleased to say that we were able to, during the first semester, our first semester beginning March of 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, or at the beginning of really of a pandemic, of what was going to be a long pandemic, having to migrate to online. Three of us, two other professors and myself, were able to implement a total of 4 of these scenarios. And so 100 students, more or less, benefited of this new way of approaching their ODE class. And what I want to tell you really for the rest of this talk is a little bit about that part, the implementation. We had to adapt not only in translating, but of course to our own local idiosyncrasies and to the situation of COVID. We had to adapt these scenarios. The first one that I worked with was Death and Immigration of the M&Ms. I worked it basically in 3 parts. The students engaged in the experimental part at home with the M&Ms, and so they responded to questions that are in the scenario, but based on just their experimental activities. In class, I went through the whole theoretical part and explaining the concept of modeling change, did that analytically, passed from the discrete to the continuous. I also went through with them the use of, well, first of all, the meaning of the sum of squared errors, the use of solver in Excel to find their parameters. And then the ball went back to their court, and they had to then use these tools to analyze the data they had obtained experimentally. And what you see here on the right is the cover page of one of the reports that was handed in by a student. I think her entire report is available for teachers on SIMIODE, because she did an extraordinary job. As you can see, this doesn't only work the mathematical skills, but also their creativity. You can see how beautifully and artistically this cover page is done, but it also shows, if you look right here in the center area, this particular student was not able to get M&Ms because we were in strict lockdown during the time we were doing this. And so she had to improvise and created M&Ms out of cardboard pieces of paper. I had others who used other very innovative forms of M&Ms, not necessarily as tasty, but quite useful for doing the experiment. For the next 2 scenarios that we worked, I had the pleasure of inviting Brian Winkle as a guest lecturer. So actually, my students, the fact that we were online just broke down that barrier and allowed my students from my university in Panama to have a world-class expert on modeling, emeritus professor from a very prestigious university in the United States, teach them about modeling. And so that was, I think, an amazing thing that happened to them. I'm sure it's something that left an indelible mark in their lives. And the way this particular scenario was organized is they had two deliverables. So in the first one, prior to this meeting with Dr. Winkle, they had to meet in groups and discuss how they would tackle the problem. They had to create minutes of that particular meeting and choose a representative to present their initial analysis or their initial trials to Brian Winkle. A couple of them did this in English, and others required me to translate. But you can see also how an amazing an experience that would have been to be speaking to a professor in the US about just ideas that you have. The second deliverable that they had was a page report where they had to write it in prose as if they were presenting really a report of their whole investigation of the problem to the head of the disaster management division. And so there I'm asking them to play the role really of what it would be like in real life to be writing such a report. The second scenario that they did with Brian Winkle, or the third of the ones we did in class, was the falling water column, where he used the videos that are available through SIMIODE to model water exiting through a hole, draining this receptacle. And they then went on to work on their own with different sized holes and explore relationship of the parameters they were calculating with the solver based on hole size, based on the number of data points they collected, the location of the data points they collected. And so they had that experience of being able to work with data that they collected themselves, or whether it be from an actual experiment they performed, from a video, or data points that were given to them, as in the oil slick problem. Here you can see a shot of the, actually I took this from a recording, because all of these lectures that they had with Brian Winkle were recorded and shared not only with my class, but with the entire community at the UTP for the inspiration, I hope, of colleagues as well as of students. These were taken when they were explaining to Brian about what their thoughts were and what the group had decided. And as a result of this, at the end of the project, because this is part of the grant that we were given, we had to also carry it through all the way, not just stop at the actual organization of the workshop, but see its impact in some measure, try to get a sense for what impact it might have had. And we did have a survey. It wasn't, unfortunately, students were focused on finals, and so we didn't get all the responses that we had hoped for. But out of the 44 responses that we did get, 90% of them were extremely positive. Students felt that these modeling activities really increased their interest in the ODE course, and in fact in the whole idea of modeling itself, which was completely new to them, to most of them. They also felt that it helped them see how problems of everyday life can be solved, or at least better understood, through the use of differential equations. How scientists might go about their work, it gave them a clearer sense of what that meant. And they really encouraged us professors to keep conducting these kinds of educational activities. So all in all, I was really satisfied with what we were able to accomplish in the middle of a COVID pandemic. And that's what I bring to you from Panama. And thank you so much for your attention. So
thank you very much. I'm sorry, I was having trouble finding my mute button.
I don't, oh, that's no problem. I was wondering if I have no idea whether I think I didn't go over, maybe it was too fast. So that's fine. It's always better.
You actually have time for some questions. So
Great.
We would invite some questions.
Norma, can one find actual details of your workshop online? Do you have it online that people can go in and look at it?
So do you mean recorded? Do you mean the content of the workshop? What would you need or like?
Well, content.
Yeah. So the content of the workshop is basically these 8 SIMIODE. So some of the SIMIODE scenarios were translated, 8 of them. That's a lot of work to translate. That. We had a graduating student helped us with that. Brian actually, he has such a wealth of knowledge at his fingertips that he brings in a number of others. He brought into the workshop other scenarios which we had not translated, but referred to them sort of tangentially to make a point or one way or the other. But essentially, if I can say, the material is in SIMIODE. It's the SIMIODE. It's these scenarios that I mentioned. I can give you like a layout of what the workshop entailed. That's not published per se. I can provide it to you if you would like to see what the workshop covered in that sense.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to give you an email or something?
For sure. Right. If you type it into the chat, that would be the best, because that way I will get it right.
Yep, that's the best way. I agree. Other questions?
Norma, I have a question.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Hello. I what's your name?
Leela from
Hi, Leela.
Central Michigan University, Michigan.
Okay. Hi, Leela.
I mean, I was impressed by, I know Brian quite some time, and I heard it from many of my colleagues. I know his intelligence. I know he's a very bright person. And I was interested in knowing that in your university, the number of students you have collaborated and worked on this project, what was their background? Are they math majors, majority of them? Did you pick it up from engineering or science, chemistry, biology?
Okay, so we are organized very differently in Panama than in the US. Okay. So all of this particular class that I was teaching, they were all civil engineering students, second year civil engineering students. For the most part. Occasionally I'll get a higher up student who's taking the course again.
Okay.
So they were all civil engineering. In that sense, the M&M's project was, totally unrelated to them. However, since it did coincide with the COVID situation, at least the idea of people they might die, or the immigration, they could see a connection there. And that one was mainly to introduce ideas. Then there was the one of the expansion. Well, that might be a little more related to some of the things that civil engineers deal with, as well as the draining, right? Because But the other colleagues who taught who taught their students would have had a different collection. Some might have had like an electrical engineering students. Yeah, but mine were all pretty homogeneous. However, I do have to say that in Panama, math backgrounds are really very, very poor. You know, we don't do very well on the PISA exams. The education system is quite broken here. And so we have to do a lot of remedial work in the courses as we go with them.
Correct.
Yeah, so I find myself correcting all kinds of things when I'm working on correcting their projects. Everything from writing and spelling to, you know, putting down ideas to the math. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's the most satisfying.
That is amazing. And I mean, I do run a small group of people. What I do is when
I'm sorry, we're running out of time. And so if you guys would like to talk outside, we'd appreciate that. Just one quick more question, Norma. I had missed that some people had asked.
Thank you.
Lila, let's talk later, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
What were the favorite projects that the students did? Just one more minute, please, and then we'll move on to the next session.
Oh, well, I don't know. I did not ask them, which that's a good question. I should have asked which was their favorite. I think that the favorite I would say that it was the Torricelli one, because it matches so perfectly. The data that they collect from the video matches the curve so perfectly, the theoretical curve, that just kind of blew them away. That really just blew them away. Wow, this really works.